So let's look at the Boolean operators. The exclamation point is the not operator. So that reverses the Boolean value from true to false. The not is a unary operator, and that means it only operates on one operand. So if we take a look at that, we can say not true, this exclamation point is the operator, true is the operand, there's only one operand, and we get the return value of false. The and, which uses two ampersands together, is the logical and. Both have to be true in the logical and in order to return a true value. And that makes sense. If you tell your kids you can't play video games until you practice the piano and do your homework, it's not going to, they're not going to get to play video games until both have been completed. It's the same thing with the and operator. The next operator on the list here is the straight up and down line, and that is for the logical or operator. If either one or the other operand is true, then it results in true. So if I told my kids that either they had to do the dishes or wipe the table, then they only have to do one of those things. So if one is true, then they can get a result of true. So if I say true or false, one of the conditions was met, so the entire result, the evaluation of the operation, would be true. So both have to be false in order to return the false result. If we look at using the not operator on something other than a Boolean value, well, if we look at not, let's sure do hello. If we look at not hello, well, what is the rule for conversion? If we explicitly convert hello to a Boolean, we know we get the value true. So it's saying use the not on the conversion to the value. So not true should give us false. And so there we have the false. So this not operator is only working on Booleans, and therefore this is implicitly converted to a Boolean, and then we get the result. Now the and the or work a little differently. It uses the concept of the conversion to determine whether it's true or false, but it doesn't convert the result. So if I said hello or false, well, we know hello converts to true. If either side of the or is true, then we know it will return true. So the result of this is true, and it's because of this first operand that it's true. But instead of giving us the conversion back, it gives us the operand back. So it doesn't matter which one is first. If the first one is false, so null converts to false on a Boolean. So if we said null and hello, the null is going to evaluate to false, and so then it has to check if the other one is true, and it will return the hello. So how it works is it checks the first operand on an or. If it evaluates to true, then it returns that first operand without the conversion. If the first one returns false, then it checks the second one, and if that one returns true, then it will return the second operand. Let's check what happens if they both return false. So null gets converted by a Boolean to false. Undefined gets converted to the Boolean value of false. And as you can see, it just simply returned the undefined. That's because once we check the first value, if it's false, then we know that the evaluation of the second value would determine if it's true or false. Let's look at the and. So if we put in hello and false, well, for an and, we know both have to be true. So we check the first argument. If it evaluates to false, then we know that we don't even have to check the second argument because they both have to be true. So in this case, it evaluates to true, so we do need to move to the next argument. Well, the next argument is false, and so we know that the value is going to be false. But let's look at another example. Let's take hello and empty string. Hello, again, is going to evaluate to true. We know that it could be true, but it depends upon the second value. Well, the second value is going to evaluate to false because empty string converts to false. And so if we had this as a condition, we would see that it would evaluate to false, but it doesn't return the false. It simply returns the second parameter. So if the first parameter converts to a true, then it just simply returns the second parameter because that will determine the result. And let's reverse those. In this case, our first parameter is going to evaluate to false because empty string converts to the Boolean false. And so we know that this entire expression cannot be true. So it doesn't bother to even check the second half of the expression and just simply returns the first because that gives us the false.